on the Beiyang Navy, but I'm not going to talk about that because that I'm going to go into very, very detailed discussion in the next talk on this on Sino-Japanese War. So these are kind of the industry. So we talked about the political or the intellectual arguments, and these are some of the things that the open-minded guys did. And so now we go on to that period, the most difficult part, which is dealing with the foreigners. So now we're in a section of different cases. The first case that I'm going to talk about, early 1870s, it's called the Tianjin religious incident. When we talk about religious incident or incident of religion, the religion is usually it's about Christianity, and the incident it's basically about foreign affairs of the difficulties that happen between the foreign powers and China because of Christianity. This is religion of the ocean, Yangjiao. So it's like because a white person would be an oceaner, right? The oceaner. So the Boxer Rebellion would be the amalgamation of all the religious incidents, but it wasn't the first one. From 1861, when the Beijing, when the Treaty of Peking stipulates that the foreign missionaries can spread Christianity into the inland. From then till 1900, which is when the Boxer Rebellion happened, in those 40 years, there were 811 religious incidents. So you can think of it as like once every 10 days. And one of the big ones in the 1870s. And you look at it, it's like, A, it wasn't the first time, and B, like it was really random. And the reason why it escalated from a religious incident to the Boxer from the Boxer Rebellion, from a religious incident all the way to the invasion of 8 foreign powers is mostly because of the internal political structure, the changes, which I'll go into when I talk about the Boxer Rebellion. But in this case, it could have led to the same incident. What happened with the Tianjin religious incident was that there was a rumor that French missionaries or foreign missionaries were kidnapping kids and taking the eyeballs and the hearts and leaving them in the wild. And so there was a huge uproar from the local peasants. They stormed into the churches. They killed nuns and priests. And then there was the French minister took out his gun, and so he was beaten to death by peasants. At that time, the governor of Zhili is basically of today's Hebei, Tianjin, and Beijing as one political entity. The head was Zhang Guofan. Zhang Guofan had to deal with this, and Zhang Guofan is a guy who, like he's a moral guy, right? As I was mentioning, to be a person, how to be a person, learn from Zhang. Zhang, what he did was he did like a Sherlock Holmes actual investigation. What turns out was something like this. The Christian missionaries were trying to help sick kids. And so for most of the kids that would go to the mission, like go to the churches to be healed or to be administered, were pretty much about to die anyway. So that's why it was like the mortality was very high, because they were very sick. And in order to give incentives for the peasants to bring sick orphans to the churches, the priests paid the peasants. And obviously the peasants then made these kids orphaned, right? Like they just take kids randomly in order to earn the kickback. And then when the kids died, they were buried. So the priests would pay local peasants to bury the kids. But obviously, they did it the Chinese way, which is not very thorough. So they just buried them in a very thin sliver. And so the dogs were like they would take the corpse out and bite. So that's why there were no eyes and hearts. So they realized it's got nothing to do with the foreigners, like kidnapping kids and taking hearts and lungs out. And so Zhang did that. And so he gave a full report. The report became public, and he was completely demonized by the establishment for being on the side of the foreigners. So, and then you could see this is the soft skill of Empress Dowager. She knew all along, but she just had to get Zhang to say it, to undermine him, because he was the guy he was the teacher of Li, and Li had the biggest military machine by that point, the Huai army. And also he was like the guy who put down the Taiping Rebellion, and he was Han, he was a Manchurian, so it's important to undermine him. So that's why the Emperor Sejong gave him to be in charge of the investigation, and so he was completely undermined, and so Li became the new governor of Zhili, Li Hongzhang. And so when Zheng asked Li Hongzhang, how are you going to deal with the foreigners? Because you're in this important position now. The governor of Zhili is also the Beiyang official. There's Beiyang, which means North Ocean, and there's Nanyang official, which is where Shanghai. And because, back to the whole point about the Chinese government cannot be on par with foreign powers, usually when there's any kind of foreign incident, you would first talk to the governor of Zhili, of the official of Beiyang. And after you're done with that, you talk to the foreign regional office, which is where Prince Gong was. So that's and this is interesting because the Qing government would not deal with the foreign powers on an equal footing. That's why they created these offices. But it's actually because of this office that the Qing Dynasty eventually collapsed, because the guy who basically took power from the Qing court, Yuan Shikai, was a Beiyang official, because the Beiyang became more and more important. Li was in effect the prime minister / foreign minister of the whole administration. So whatever that was trying to keep with their face, that's what eventually killed the Qing government. But anyway, Li told Zheng the way that he's going to deal with foreigners is he's going to play like a snake, as in be very crafty, never head on. Zheng was like, no, you have to use sincerity, and Li was like, no way. And that's why you could tell, from the sending kids to America, that's why Yong Hong said, if it was Zheng, these kids could have stayed. But Li was like, oh well, let's not put up a fight. That's why Li is very crafty in that sense. And so what he did was, in a crafty way, was how many foreigners died? Okay, 4 Russians and 16 foreigners, easy. We'll just get whoever is going to be executed anyway. And how about this? 1 to 1. 1 foreigner to 1 Chinese life. So they executed a bunch of the prisoners who was executed anyway, and then paid their families off. And then they stick huge stickers like "Do not disturb foreigners," and they put it in really, really conspicuous places, conspicuous to the foreigners only. So it's only mostly in the foreign quarters. So you stick it do not disturb foreigners, and you stick it in Wan Chai and Lan Kwai Fang, like that. But you never see it in Mongkok, for example. In English. In English, yeah. So that's how Li handled the situation. But this is one of the main things, and then this thing would happen again and again and again and again. The most important, the biggest religious incident would happen in 1900, the Boxer Rebellion, which I would definitely go into.
When you talk about, can you define a religious incident? What does that mean?
A religious incident is when there's a foreign affairs incident, you come into a conflict with a foreign power because of the church. So mostly is this, and Christianity is an expansive religion, and so most of the time they'll come in to build churches, and obviously you've got the superior legal position, because the local government officials cannot have a ruling on foreigners. So let's say, for example, you killed me today, not today, in 1880. You would not be subjected to a Chinese court. You'd be subject to an American court. And so usually it's very lenient. And so it's an incident. A religious incident would be a church coming in, build a church, and obviously usually they build a church on what would be in the same site of a local Chinese god temple. And that's what happened in Boxer. That's what happened in 1898, which is kicked off the Boxer Rebellion. And obviously
that's what the Christians did in Rome too.
That's what Christians do everywhere.
Yeah.
So when that happens, there'll be a huge uproar between the peasants and the church. And then what happens would be the local Chinese official usually would not do anything, because they want the foreigners to go as much as the peasants too. And another thing is, you don't mess with a lot of people, a lot of your own jurisdiction. So they would then become violent to foreigners, usually the priests and the nuns. And then the foreign governments would then have to barge would come in and to protect their own, to protect their expats. So that's a religious incident. Yeah. So this is the Tianjin religious incident. Another incident that happened afterwards, it would be 1874, when Japan took Okinawa. And then Okinawa was previously a vassal state of China. That's why you go to Okinawa, it's like, look at the decorations and the food, it's mostly Taiwanese, right? And it's very Chinese too. But then after the Meiji Restoration in 1868, Japan, whenever it unifies itself, it becomes expansive. It happened once in the Qing Dynasty, happened again under Hideyoshi in 1590s. That's why they invaded Korea, which led to, that's why the Ming defended Korea in the 1590s. And then expansive again after the Meiji Restoration in 1868. So they basically invaded Okinawa. The Prince Regent of Okinawa was actually waiting for Li Hongzhang outside his office for like 6 hours. But Li didn't want to mess with the Japanese, so he actually basically let go of Okinawa to the Japanese. And so when there were a bunch of Okinawans in 1871 that they floated to Taiwan, they got killed by a bunch of local Taiwanese aboriginals, like Jiang Weimei, like Jiang Huimei, like something like that, like the singer, would be like a local Taiwanese aboriginal. And the Japanese then there was a foreign affair incident with China, and saying you killed, a bunch of your citizens killed a bunch of our citizens. What are you going to do about it? And the Chinese, and this is a problem with all of the Chinese, the subsequent conflicts with the foreign powers. Mostly it's because you can't really define what is proper China. At that point in time, China, there was these inner regions, which is they have a direct administrative control, but then there were also areas where the control is tenuous. One of the areas would be Taiwan. And so when that happened, the Zhongliyamen, the foreign office, regional office said, we can't really do much about it because it's a bunch of Taiwanese aboriginals killed a bunch of Okinawans. And the Okinawans, not even Japanese, why do you care? And the Japanese are like, no, Okinawans are now Japanese. And if you're not handling this, we'll handle it. And so the Japanese sent 3,000 troops to south of Taiwan. But thanks to the Huai army, they beat the Japanese away. When they beat the Japanese away, the Japanese actually were already building different infrastructure in Taiwan. And so in the foreign affairs settlement, the Chinese paid the Japanese 500,000 taels of silver for leaving. It's going to pay them off to leave. And so that's why remember the Second Opium War, where this guy, he was kidnapped by the Chinese, the guy called Parkes. He was then the ambassador to Japan from England, and he said, you know what, this is China's way of asking for more invasions, right? And which happened. And so you look at this. This happened in 1874, and you look at the randomness of circumstances in 1894. You realize China was basically just a sitting duck, waiting for Japan to invade. The 1874 didn't work out. I'm going to talk about 1884 later. So even if 1894 didn't happen, 1904 would have happened. And I'll get to that later. And then another thing, it's the Agouba rebellion. Agouba was actually it's exactly the same issue as today. He is a Eastern Turkic guy from Xinjiang, and he, with the support of the British and the Russians, rebelled against the Qing government. And actually, because of the Japanese invasion to Taiwan, there was a huge debate between Zhang and Zuo. Between Li and Zuo, between General Chou and Li Hongzhang. Li Hongzhang said we should, pay Agouba off and build a new navy that would help with defending the coastline. Zuo said we must defend Xinjiang. A, it's part of China, and B, if this will become pro-Russian, then Beijing would be very dangerous. But so they both have a point, because basically China has 3 defense lines. If you look at it, it's exactly the same as today. It's the relation with Putin. So this line is the line between an annual rainfall of 15 inches more is down here, and then less is up here. This line, what other line is this?
The river, yellow. Oh, the Great Wall.
The Great Wall. So the Great Wall was not random. It was built basically, this is the line, the division of agriculture and nomads. This is one line. And so if Xinjiang is basically it's to defend this line, basically a line with Russia. And then also there's this line, actually, which is obviously the line that America is trying to ambush China with. And also this line. So Burma, Burma being, like, that's why America is substantially more, like, chummier with Vietnam and Burma. And this is the South China Sea. So you can see these are the different defense lines of China. And so basically that argument in the 1870s is, are we going to defend this line or this line? But China didn't have given the weakness. It was kind of like you have lung cancer, you've got kidney cancer. So which one should we do first? It's a little bit like that. And so Zuo ultimately won the debate, and he actually so General Chou invaded. Put down the rebellion. Actually fought off the Russians. Actually, so this period is a relatively powerful period of China. They actually beat the Russians. General Chou. General Chou is very similar to Zheng. He's a very tenacious guy. So when he was in his 60s when he was fighting the Xinjiang rebellion, and he actually built his own coffin, and he brought his coffin everywhere, to show the soldiers that in the first instant, I'm willing to die at any point in time. And he would drink ice, and he would sleep on an ice bed along with other soldiers. So he's really the forefront of the action, and that's why the Chinese army was able to beat the Xinjiang rebellions and also then the Russians. And it was because of that. That's why Xinjiang is still part of China. So it's actually, when people say General Chou, is there General Chou? Like, there is. And if it's not for General Chou, Xinjiang would not be part of China.
Chinese coffins are pretty substantial.
They're pretty big. It's huge. Yeah. By the way, General Chou's chicken he didn't really eat General Chou's chicken. It was actually one day in 1970 when then President Jiang Jingguo, so Jiang Jieshi's son, was hungry. He went to a Hunan restaurant, but then it was closed. It was 2 or 3 a.m. And then the restaurant owner cooked something for the president, and the president was like, "This tastes pretty good." And I was like, "What is this?" And I was like, "It's what General Chou used to eat." Yeah. And another story would be, Pao Chicken. Pao Chicken was actually a guy, is the governor of Shandong. Actually, his story, and this is like a side story. His story actually you could tell is you could see that the Empress Dowager did not have full power. The Empress Dowager wanted to send one of her eunuchs, Andahai, to go and procure things for her, but eunuchs are not supposed to leave Beijing. So when the eunuch, he's really powerful, went to Shandong, this official called Shen Baozhen killed him. And the Empress Dowager couldn't do anything about it because Ci'an and Prince Gong was behind them, the killing. And this governor of Shandong then went to Sichuan. And then he used to like to eat chicken with the sweet Shandong sauce. And then going to Sichuan, they put the Sichuan spice. And that's why Pao Chicken happened. Pao was his official title. Yeah, so it's not. So you look, it's not Gong Bao. Sometimes write Bao as in explode, as in fry. It's Gong Bao, because Gong Bao is Shen Baozhen's not Shen Baozhen, Ding Baozhen's official title, Gong Bao. So it's Gong Bao Chicken. Yeah, yes. So that's Aguba rebellion. And again, this is a period where China was not that weak in that sense. And then the next incident is the McGarry Incident. McGarry Incident was in 1874. There was this British foreign official went unauthorized to Yunnan from Burma and went into a little bit of a conflict with the local officials and was shot. And when he was shot, the British demanded reparation from China and also signed the Yantai Treaty. And part of it was that the Chinese must have an embassy in London, and then to apologize to Queen Victoria for what had happened. So it's called the McGarry Incident. And